Hello everyone, it's Parisha from The Artistic Scroll, and in today's Procreate tutorial, we're getting into the holiday spirit by creating a festive arrangement of Christmas ornaments. We'll be crafting realistic looking ornaments with beautiful glittery textures on the gold baubles, creating shiny metallic caps and glittery patterns on the vibrant red and green ones, and adding festive touches to the mix with twigs, berries and bronze leaves. And to tie it all together, we'll create a lush green background with subtle snowflake details for a truly magical finish. To follow along, you'll need your iPad, Apple Pencil and the Procreate app. Don't forget to download the free sketch file and color palette from the Artistic Archive. They're free to download and ready to help you get started. So once you're ready with the files, let's dive right in and bring these ornaments to life. Welcome guys, so this is what your canvas will look like once you've downloaded it from the Artistic Archive. And as you can see, we've already got the sketch here on layer 1. So all we need to do right now is just rename it as sketch. And then we can change the blend mode of this layer to multiply. And then reduce the opacity of this layer down to around just 25% or so. That'll help us to just visualize our sketch enough to not interfere with the rest of our drawing. Alright, so you've also got your color palette downloaded from the archive too, hopefully by now. So all you need to do at this point is just tap on these green dots, set it as default, and then by just dragging along this little gray bar, you can move your color palette menu to the left. Brilliant. So we're going to start off with the gold baubles right here. Okay, so all we really need to do at this point is select our technical pen brush in inking, and we can use the gold color, and let's just get started. So you can have your brush size somewhere around 16 to 18%. Oh, we want the gold color. Am I on the wrong one? Yes, I am on the wrong one. Okay, so what we need to do now is tap on this plus sign, and then we're going to move this new layer that's been created under the sketch layer. So this is going to be the layer for the gold baubles. Okay, so now we can select the gold color and then get started with these gold ones. So make sure that you're using your quick shape menu with this, which means that you have to just tap on the screen to get a perfect circle and then let go of your pencil so that you can see something like this come up, okay? And then go ahead and just fill it. Make sure your threshold is as maximum as you can go. And then you can go ahead and also have this little loop on top for the gold ones. All right, so we're going to do this for all of these. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and fill all of these in, and I will see you once I'm done. Okay, so we've got all of our gold baubles created. Great. Now we're going to create the red ones. So we're going to make a new layer right on top of the gold baubles, and then we're going to select the red color. And for this, for the red baubles, we're going to be starting off with this one. And then this particular Now when you draw this one, you've just got to go ahead and use your technical pen brush as your eraser as well. reduce your brush size quite like about 7%, and then go ahead and just erase this gold bubble area from the red bubble, because we want this gold bubble to be on top. Okay, and then you can go ahead and paint in any bit that's still remaining on top. I find this method a bit more useful than clearing certain sections of the layers, mainly because you're left with a line sometimes of background pixels, and that just does not look very nice, and you have to go to all limits to go ahead and fill it all in, so that doesn't look very nice. I'm just going to give this yellow gold bubble a little bit more thickness over here, just like that. Okay, so that's red, and then we are also going to be making this main bubble over here red too. So let's go ahead and create that perfect circle and fill it in. Oh, and I missed one yellow gold one here as well. We'll do that in a minute. And there are so many of these, it's hard to keep up. So both of these two bubbles, this one and the one right next to it, will both be red too. So let's paint them in. Okay, and then this hanging bubble here as well, and we're going to do the same thing. We'll have to erase a little bit of the red bubble because the gold bubble right next to it is in front. So that is one technique that you can utilize in your illustrations, guys. Overlapping objects bring along a lot of depth to your illustration, and also help to make it look a lot more interesting. So we'll be doing a lot of that in this illustration. So go ahead and erase this section from the gold bubble area as well. From the red bubble off the gold bubble, you know what I mean. Okay, I'm also gonna go back to my gold bubble layer and paint in this little gold one here, which is hiding in the corner. Okay, so that's looking very good. And then the remaining three here would be the almost white ivory kind of color here. So we're going to create a new layer above the red bubble area, red bubble layer. And with the same technical pen brush, we're going to select the ivory color, and let's go ahead and paint in this ivory bubble. Now once again we'll have to erase the red bubble area here. If you're getting a white line like that and you're feeling a bit uncomfortable with it, one technique to do this is to tap on your red bubble layer and then just tap on select, And you'll see that you've got this area here that is still not highlighted by these lines here. Okay, so that means that it's part of the red and it's overlapping. So all you need to do now is either you can go ahead and just erase it off this section here by going on your ivory layer. There you go, you can do that. Or you can also tap on this layer and go tap on clear, so it just clears off instantly on its own. So that's one quick way to do it. The only thing that will happen in that case is you'll get a very, very thin line here of pixels that have not been colored in, and at some point you'll see that the background color, once we do have it in here, that will show through. So to prevent that from happening, what you can do is tap on clear and then also just select this again, the red color, and tap on invert. So now you're on your peach color. I think it's more like a light peach, isn't it, rather than ivory. So we'll just call it light peach ivory. You know what color I mean by that. Okay, so if you go back to your ivory color, what you can do now is, with your technical pen brush, is increase your brush size and then try and color a bit. Drag your color inside this line so that even the smallest of pixels get colored. So you can see that, I don't know if the camera is able to pick this up or not, but you will be able to see the difference at your own end. If you color this in, that there are some pixels that are getting colored in. So that's exactly what we want. We don't want any gap between the two layers here. So make sure to color all of them in. And that's one technique that you can also use. Just be careful once you reach the edge. You don't want to go and beyond the boundary there. And that's it. Okay, so that's looking great. And we're going to turn off our selection. We're still on our peach bubble layer, so I'm going to go ahead and paint in this second one here. And then if you just want to resize everything, or at least place it back into position, you can go ahead and select and do that too. Yeah, and then go ahead and fill it in. Looks good. Now once again, what we want to do is just erase this part here. So let's go ahead, select your red layer here, go back to your peach color, and then at this point, oops, just go ahead and erase it. I think I will just erase this manually because it's allowing me to be a bit more aware of exactly which pixels I'm kind of removing. And we can do the same thing as well again, because I can see a white line there. So it's just like another technique, guys. You can either not use the selection one and then manually just erase it yourself as well. But I think it's a small price to pay for having to go through all of that trouble. So just as you can see, inverted the selection mask on the red layer. And I'm just trying to color in that white gap in the pixels. And of course, if you don't mind that little gap being there, it's fine too. You don't have to do much. But yeah, okay, so that's that. And we've got one more. And thankfully this one is right on top, so we don't have to do any more erasing or anything like that. So let's go ahead and just paint this one in too. Okay, so that's looking great. we've got all of our bubbles ready. Now the next thing we need to paint are these metal caps on all of these bubbles here. We're going to paint the loops on a different layer. So on this first layer, let's create one layer above the ivory bubbles. And with the same technical pen brush and the gold color, we're only going to be painting this cap area. So reduce your brush size, about 8% or so, gives you a bit more control over your brush strokes. And you can go ahead and just paint it in. Fill it in. And let's just do this for all of the metal caps on all of the bubbles. I'll see you once it's done. Alright, so I've made all of the caps here. We're going to create a new layer and paint in all of the cap loops here. So let's go ahead and paint in all of those. So I think a good brush size to manage all of the loops in one go would be around, I'd say, 11%. So we can go ahead and paint those in. So 2 lines of those should normally suffice. But yeah, have a look. Alright, so that's all done. I'm going to increase the opacity of the caps as well, and that's looking good. Alright, so next thing that we're going to be working on would be these strings here that you can see. So we're going to create a new layer above these cap loops layer, and then we are going to, I think we can just use the technical pen brush, or if you're feeling fancy you can use the ink bleed brush as well. It's got nice frayed edges, but I'm just going to stick with that. So I have a brush size of around 14% that I can use for this, and there we go. We're just using the gold color again for this. And you can see that one part of the string is on top of each bubble loop and the other one is behind it. So that's why we've got a little bit of a space between both of them. You can even just draw both of these lines together and then erase this little bubble area from there. Alright, so that was easy, a quick one. Next we're going to be creating the green beads here. So create a new layer on top of the strings. And for the green beads we're using this green color in the second row. And this will be all of these little balls that we've got that are not attached to any of these stalks or twigs. Alright, so let's go ahead and paint them in. Okay, and when you reach parts like these where you need to be careful about what you need to paint, just be a bit aware of where exactly you're drawing. I could go again and use those select and invert and all of those techniques, but I'm trying to show you all the techniques that you can use, and this is just free plain drawing. And just being careful not to encroach too much upon the gold ones. Right, so that's great. And the next thing we're working on would be the brown twigs. Add these leaves here as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and paint those in. We're creating a new layer above the green beads layer, and then we're going to continue using our technical pen brush with the brown color in the second row. Let's go ahead and paint in the twigs here that we've got right here at the end. Let's start from the top. And then carry on. So just be careful of the margins here again, not to encroach too much on the bubble itself. Okay, so I think I've got all of these. Oh wait, just a little one here too. Okay, so we've got all of our twigs and leaves done. If there are any more, we'll have them on a little later whenever we come across them. Okay, next bit we're going to make these berries over here. So let's create a new layer above the brown leaves and twigs layer, and we're going to use this peach color to make the berries. So let's go ahead and paint them all in. Okay, so we've got all of these peach-ish berries painted here, and after this we need to paint in our snowflakes here. Now if you can see, I'm going to bring back the opacity of the sketch layer a bit so you can make out the colors a bit better. I'm sure at your end you can, it's just for the camera's sake. All the ones that are behind these bubbles on the left side are in orange here. So those will be painted this first green color here in the fourth row, okay? And then the ones that are in blue, so the nice three little snowflakes that we've got, they will be the second green color. And then the remaining pink ones will be the third darker green color. Alright, so let's get started with this. Now, the snowflakes will be painted right below this gold bubbles layer. So create a new layer and move it below this gold bubbles layer. Alright, so we're going to get started with these first, the orange one. So I'm going to select my first green color, and I'm going to reduce my sketch's opacity. And with the same technical pen brush, let's get started. Okay, so these are all done. Next I'm going to be painting in these light blue ones here. So we've got 3 of them with this middle green color in the 4th row. So you can still be on the same layer, it doesn't really matter. Don't really need to be creating a separate layer for each of them. So just select your middle green color and paint in the others. Okay, so we've got our light colored snowflakes ready as well, and all of the remaining ones will now be painted this 3rd green color that we have, the darker green. So let's go ahead and paint in those. Okay, so these are all drawn in. That's looking very nice. Now we're just going to color a background so that you're able to see these color differentiation even better. So to do that, let's just go ahead and tap on background color, and we're going to select this really dark green here right below the gold color. Or if you're still on the color palette, you can also select, it's the same color which is under brown here on the mini color palette. Okay, so I'm going to tap on this one under the gold one, and there you go. You can see this beautiful color combination. It's looking great. All right, so the next thing that we're going to be working on would be the patterns on these red bubbles and the white ivory, peach, whatever you want to call them, those bubbles. And that would mean after that, we are done with our flat colors. So let's get started with the red bubbles first. Select your red bubbles layer here. And what we're going to do now is create a new clipping mask to the red bubbles layer. And we're essentially using just two colors for all of the patterns here. It's going to be the gold one, or it's going to be this ivory color. All right, so let's start from the top one here. We're going to select our gold color, and we're going to paint two lines right here. Let's go ahead and fill those in. And then we're going to use the technical pen brush as our eraser. And you can increase your brush size to about a 7 or an 8%. 8% would be ideal. And all we're going to do is just erase out this pattern from this gold layer. Simple? Alright, so let's continue then. That's that one done. For this bubble here, only our diamonds and the little dots up over there are going to be in gold. Everything else is going to be with this ivory color. So let's go ahead and paint those in. And then for the others, we're using the ivory color and painting in the rest of the pattern on this bubble. Okay, so that one's done. Then for this next one, since we already have our ivory color, we can paint in this leaf pattern along with the dots, the same color. I'm just going to erase this little dot that I've somehow managed to create. Move it, and let's see, where else have I got this? Here we go. Okay, so let's go back to our pattern layer, and there we go. And we can also paint in these leaves here at the bottom, ivory as well. Okay, and these two lines here, they can be gold. So I've got a brush size again of around 8%, so that's enough to give me this nice thick line consistency. So you can use the same at your end too. Or you can have them thicker or thinner, however you want. Okay, so that's great. Next we're going to move on to this one. It's a rather simple one. I'll increase my brush size to around 13% and we're just painting in these lines here. So it's the same gold color. There we go, easy peasy. And then this particular bauble will have everything with this ivory color, so paint those in. Okay, so that's there. And then for our last hanging bauble out here, we can paint everything with gold in this one. Alright, so that's looking very good. Now we can go ahead and work on these ivory bubbles here. So for those, let's go ahead and create a new clipping mask to the ivory ones. And then everything on these ivory ones is going to be with gold. That's quite simple. So let's go ahead and paint in those. Okay, so that's all done. Let's turn off our sketch layer and have a look. It's looking great. Alright, so now we are ready to get started with all of the details about shading and bringing everything to our realistic life. Alright, so to do that, we're going to start off with the gold baubles first. Let's create a new clipping mask to the gold baubles layer, and then we're going to change the blend mode to multiply. So the gold baubles are going to be those glittery kind of bubbles, you know, like the ones that have literal glitter just stuck to them all over. So we're going to try and emulate that kind of an effect for them. For that, let's go ahead and select in charcoals the 2B compressed brush, and we have got our brown color for this. Okay, so I've got a brush size of around 16%, pretty happy with that. And all we're going to do is just paint in this texture. So we're going to build this texture up nicely. Okay, it's looking great. We're going to reduce the opacity of this layer down to 50%. And if you feel like you need to add in a bit more, go ahead and add it in, but we do not need to increase the opacity to more than 50%. Alright, next step, we're creating another clipping mask on top. And this time we're changing the blend mode to color burn. And now we're going to use this gold color for this purpose. So slightly twist your canvas if you want, and then paint in this gold texture. Well, now you can see it's not exactly gold anymore because of the blend mode, but it's giving us a variation of this glitter. Okay, so that's that. We're going to reduce the opacity of this one as well, down to just 25%. Okay, so once again, if you feel like you want to increase this, go ahead and do that. Great. Next, we're going to bring about some nicer color on top of this. So create a new clipping mask, change the blend mode this time to add. And we're going to paint the same gold with the same gold color, some more texture onto this. And there you go. Now you can definitely see it's a whole lot more glittery, isn't it? Because we've got the background of different kinds of darker colors in there. And then we've also got these really pretty lighter shades now because of this. Okay, so that's great. Let's reduce the opacity of this layer to about 85%. And then we're going to go ahead and add in our shadows, because right now they look very flat. So we need to make them look more like balls themselves. So let's create a new clipping mask, and then we're going to change the blend mode to multiply for our shadows. And to add these shadows, we're going to go back to our soft airbrush, and we're going to go ahead and maybe paint these with the brown color. So increase your brush size to somewhere around 20% or so, and go ahead and paint in a crescent shaped shadow right here. Okay, at the edge. And you can perhaps add a little bit more on the left side for this one. What we're trying to achieve here is maybe our light source is somewhere around this area. We're not going to really show it, but that's what we're trying to show. So all of the shadows will be on this side or on this side of the objects on this area. If you imagine the light source here, all the light is getting hit on the right side of the objects on this left side of the screen, and then everything will be the other way on the right side. Alright, so that means that our shadows for the gold bubbles on the left side would also be on the left side. So let's go ahead and paint those in. And then also remember to account for the overlapping objects right here. So because it's a spherical object that we're trying to paint here, the shadow would curve inside the ball itself. So we want to paint it like that, not just a plain triangle. It has to curve inside to be able to give that shape of a shadow for the ball. Okay, so let's go ahead and paint those in. And then, because this one's right on the right side, our shadow will be on the right side too. Okay, so once you've got something like this in place, we're now going to go ahead and apply some Gaussian blur. So go to your adjustments tool, select Gaussian blur, and then apply about a 15% Gaussian blur to this. Okay, you can see it's already looking so much more like a 3D kind of a ball now, isn't it? Okay, so we're going to enhance the edge shadows a little bit now. So to do that, create a new clipping mask, and then we're going to go ahead and change the blend mode to multiply. No, this time let's change it to linear burn. And we're going to paint these with, let's say, the same brown color. I think it should look good. Or should we try the yellow? Yeah, I think we can try the gold color for this. So edge shadows would mean just around the edges. We don't want it to go too far into the ball itself. So just around the edges, go ahead and paint in this shadow. Okay, so that's good. Next again, we're going to apply a Gaussian blur to this. So 15% Gaussian blur once again. It's looking nice. But we're also going to reduce the opacity of this because we don't want it to be too orangey. So 60% opacity for the linear burn layer. Great. Now we're going to add some highlights. So create a new clipping mask, and then we're going to change the blend mode this time to add. And we're going to go back to our brown color now. Now our highlights are going to be on the opposite side of the shadows, so go ahead and paint those in. Remember to maintain that crescent shape. Okay, great. Let's go ahead and blur this. So Gaussian blur again, and we're going to apply another 15%. And it's starting to look really nice. You can see that the glitter effect is getting enhanced here. So that's how you kind of build up on this glitter effect here with just a 2B charcoal brush and lots of blend modes. Okay, and then we're just going to add some more highlights here. So to do that again, create a new clipping mask, change the blend mode to add once more, and then we're going to go back to our gold color this time, and then we're going to paint in some highlights just in the centers. Of our highlight areas, so not right in the center of the bubble itself, but more like center of the highlight area. And once you're done with that, go ahead and apply another Gaussian blur, 15%, and we're going to reduce the opacity of this layer down to around 40%. There you go, that's looking so much nicer, exactly like a ball. Beautiful. One thing that we can also do is to add some highlights and shadows to these loops here for all of these, what do you call them? The golden bubbles. So on the same layer that you were on right now, go ahead and add in your highlights just on these loops. So you can see what I'm doing is I'm creating a highlight here on the top part of the loop and one on the inner side. And we're going to do the same thing but on the opposite side for our shadows in a minute. Okay, so that's that. Let's use the soft airbrush as our blend tool and just quickly blend these in so they're not so sharp. Alright, and then let's go back to our linear burn layer, or actually let's go back to our multiply layer here, right below the linear burn, and then we'd use the brown color for that. So the opposite ends we're going to add in our shadows, so you can see how it's looking. So basically what I've done is I've continued. So we had the highlight on this side, as you can see, so I've continued it down on the right side as the shadow, and then on the inner edge the shadow is on the opposite side, as the light's going to probably hit this area and this will be in shadow. Okay, so go ahead and paint in the shadows on the opposite side for all of these. And while you're at it, you might as well, just for the string ones, also add in the shadow for the strings. Okay, so that's looking good. We are done with our gold baubles. Amazing. So let's go ahead and group our gold bauble layers together. And then I'm just going to rename this group as gold baubles. Perfect. We're going to move on to the red and the peach one simultaneously, because they're essentially almost the same steps in all of them, so I'll work through all of them together. Don't worry, I'm gonna guide you through everything step by step. Let's start with the red one. So we're going to create a new clipping mask just below this pattern layer, okay? Because we're going to try and create a bit more of a texture. It's going to be very, very faint. I don't want too much of a texture on these bubbles here because it's going to take away from the effect that we're trying to achieve. So we'll create a new clipping mask to this bubbles layer below the pattern layer, and then we're going to change the blend mode to multiply. And then for this texture, let's go to textures here in the brush library, and we'll select the signet brush. Okay, and with the red color, select your red color. I've got a brush size of around 12%, happy with that. Just go ahead and lightly apply this texture. Now the reason why I don't want to go ahead and apply too much of a dark one is because this brush firstly is a buildable one. Like if you paint over it, it's going to get darker with every brush stroke. So just in one smooth brush stroke and not changing your pressure on the screen, go ahead and paint in this beautiful texture. Okay, do that for all of these red ones. Also, because I don't want to make this red color too dark now, because I like how vibrant and bright this original red color really is, but we still want to give these bubbles a bit more of a texture. So we've painted this texture on. We're going to reduce the opacity of this down to around 50%. So you can see it's barely there, but if you really zoom in, you would be able to make out a very fine granular kind of a texture, and I think that's enough for these bubbles. So we're also going to do the same thing with the ivory ones. So create a new clipping mask right above the base, and then change the blend mode to multiply and reduce the opacity down to 50%. Okay, and we will select our peach color for this. Go ahead and add in your texture. Okay, so that's looking great. Next step, we're going to go ahead and add some actual glitter effect on these patterns that we made basically. So one thing to just understand here is that the ones that have this whitish kind of a pattern, the ones on the red, we're not going to have a glitter effect on those. Those are just like painted on, that kind of an effect. So we're going to leave those as they are. But the gold ones are all going to be glitter on. So just like these glitter balls. So the way to do that, let's start with the red ones. We're going to create a new clipping mask above the pattern layer. And then we're going to change the blend mode of this new layer to multiply. Now, select your pattern layer here on the red bubbles layer. Make sure you tap on select here as well. So what that means is that all of these are selected now and you cannot go beyond the selection onto your red area. Okay, so go back to this new layer that you made now. Okay, and then we're going to select our brown color for this purpose, and for our texture brush, this time instead of the 2B compressed one, we're going to go with the 6B compressed. Basically the 2B compressed is a very fine glittery kind of effect which we've already used for the balls. This one's going to be a thicker, more irregular kind of a glitter effect, so we're using that. So you've still got your brown color, go ahead and paint it in. Just be careful not to go into the white side, and if you do, it's alright, you can always go and erase some of that. Okay, so just paint in this texture onto the gold side only, and then you can also reduce your brush size and just paint in these diamonds here. If you feel like it's too, make sure that you can still see the yellow bit beyond this brown texture now. Okay, and here too. And we've also got this hanging bubble. Okay, so that's that. We're going to reduce the opacity of this layer now down to 50%. Great. Let's do the same for our white ones as well because they have a lot of gold over here. So I'm going to remove the selection and create a new clipping mask above the pattern layer here. If it helps, you can always just rename your pattern layer as the pattern, because it'll be easier to locate straight away, because you will be selecting and deselecting quite a bit again and again. So for the white ones, we are creating this new layer, and then we're changing the blend mode to multiply and reducing the opacity down to 50%, just like we did for the red ones. And then we're essentially just using the same technique again of painting in the gold lines here. So go ahead and select your pattern layer. Okay, so everything is selected. Open your layers menu again, and then go to this new layer that you've created. And then go ahead and paint in this brown glitter texture. Okay, looking good. Remove your selection and have a look. Okay, that's great. So for the next bit, we are going to duplicate this layer now. So let's start with the ivory ones first, because we're still on it. Duplicate this layer, and you can change the blend mode of the top one to color burn. So you've essentially added a bit more of, let's say, an orangish effect on this. And this time we're going to reduce the opacity of this color burn layer to 25%. Okay, let's do the same for our red bubble layer. So duplicate your multiply layer, change the blend mode to color burn for the top one, and then reduce the opacity down to 25%. Okay, looking good. Next step, we'll be adding in our highlights. So that's what's actually going to get all of this beautiful glitter effect here. So since we're on our red one, we're going to start off with that. So create a new clipping mask, change the blend mode to add, and then we can go ahead and paint in our glitter. So to do that, we are going to use the gold color, and let's get started with that. Oh, we need to select it. Okay, go back to your pattern layer, tap on select, and then return to your add layer, and there you go. They've got a beautiful glitter effect. Now as you can see, you can emphasize where you want the most light to be as well, by having more pressure on those areas. Okay, that's too bright, so yeah, go ahead and play around with that. It looks pretty. Okay, we're going to do the same for all of these now. Okay, so that's looking good. We can remove the selection, have a look. And if you feel like there are any areas where you want some more glitter to be added, go ahead and do that. I'm going to add in just a speck there. All right, good. We are happy with that. Now let's do the same thing for our ivory ones. So I'm creating a new clipping mask above the color burn layer, and then change the blend mode to add. Oh, and I think we can also reduce the opacity of our gold glitter layer here to about 85%, because eventually we will be adding some more highlights to the whole bubble in general. I don't want it to blow out to a complete white, so that's why we're just reducing the opacity a little bit. Okay, so we're going back to this new layer that we created, and we can reduce the opacity to 85% already. Great. Select your pattern layer, and then go back to the new layer and go ahead and add in your glitter. Okay, turn off your selection once you're done, and I think that's looking beautiful. Okay, so that's great. Now we can go ahead and add in shadows to the balls in general and yeah, make them look a little bit more 3D. So we're going to get started with the red ones first. So create a new clipping mask above the add layer and then change the blend mode of that one to multiply. So we're going to go back to our soft air brush, and to start off we're still having our gold color selected. Increase your brush size to around 20%, and then once again we're going to follow the same kind of effect that we had with the gold bubbles out there. So paint in a general shadow and make sure that it's following the crescent shape of the ball itself. It's going to be barely visible, this color that I'm adding right now, but we're going to build up on it with a different color later on, so leave it as it is. But yeah, so for these bubbles out here, we just have to get a bit of this shape. So you see that I've added a bit more of a shadow in this section, and definitely behind the metal cap. Okay, I would also go ahead and perhaps just add in a bit more of a shadow on this side. So it's more of a shadow over here, and just this area is in the highlight section. Okay, so for this particular red bubble, outline your shadow here, and then we can have this particular end all in shadows, something like this. Okay, and then we can do something similar for the one in the lowermost left area. And remember, our light source is here, so we have to just imagine where it's getting hit by light the most. So it's somewhere around here. That means that this entire area would be in shadows. Perhaps not that. And something like that. Okay, so that's looking fine. And then we're going to apply a Gaussian blur to this. So go ahead and apply a 15% Gaussian blur. And that's great. We're going to go to our white bubbles now and create a new clipping mask on top. Change the blend mode to multiply. And then we're going to select our peach color for the shadows. So once again, we want our shadows to be on this side, so you can see, painting in the entire thing here for shadows, and then perhaps have something like this in place. You can fill it in. And then here for this particular bubble, can be something like this. Alright, so that's looking good. Now we're just going to apply a Gaussian blur to this as well. So once again, 15%. And then we're also reducing the opacity down to just about 80% for this, because we don't want it to become too dark as such and lose this almost peachish ivory kind of a color. Okay, so just like we've added our edge shadows to our gold bubbles, we're also going to do the same thing for all of our remaining ones too. So to do that, let's create a new clipping mask and change the blend mode again to multiply. All right, now we're going to use the same peach color for our ivory ones, and it's going to be the same thing. We will paint in our edge shadows this time, so they will be covering a little lesser area of the shadows than the ones that we drew before. So go ahead and paint them all in. And once you're happy with that, we're again going to apply a Gaussian blur, 15%. 15 is the magic number. Okay, we are also reducing the opacity of this layer down to 60% because I don't want it to be too dark. Okay, brilliant. Let's move on to the red ones now. So create a new clipping mask about this gold multiply layer. And then once again, change the blend mode to multiply. And we're using the red color for our shadows here now. So let's see, I can start off with the small one here. All we need to do is just paint in something like this at the edge for the shadow. And then we're going to do the same thing on all of these, so might as well just reduce your brush size a bit and give it crisper edges. Okay, just like that. Let's do our shadows here. I think I'm going to have a little bit more on this side. Fill it in. Oops, that's too much. Probably need to join this. Okay, yeah, that's better. Alright, and for this one, the hanging bubble edge highlight. Sorry, edge shadow. So just something along here. Maybe halfway across this central gold pattern. And you can have something like this here. Fill it in. And then here we go. Alright, so once you've got this in place, we can go ahead and apply our Gaussian blur. So once more, 15%, and that's looking lovely. Alright, it's time to add in our highlights now and make this look even more magical. So to do that, let's go ahead and create a new clipping mask on top, and then change the blend mode of this one to add, and we're going to be using the whitish ivory kind of color for our highlights here on the red bubbles. So to do that, let's go and add in our highlights on the opposite sides of the shadows. So for the hanging one, we can paint in something like this perhaps. We want a crescent shape. Here we go. Then for this particular bubble, fill it in. Okay, so you've got these areas marked out for your highlights, and once these are in place, go ahead and reduce the opacity of this layer down to 50%. And we're again going to go ahead and apply a Gaussian blur of 15% once more. That's looking lovely. It's got a nice matte kind of an effect now. You can see that the shine is there, but it's giving off a matte kind of an effect instead of a very glossy bubble as such. So that's looking beautiful. Let's do the same thing for our ivory ones as well. So create a new clipping mask on top for your ivory group, and then change the blend mode to add. And we're going to go ahead. We've still got our I think we can use the peach color this time for our highlights for our ivory bubbles. So peach color selected, and then let's paint in a greater area of highlights on this. So perhaps something around here. You can just highlight the entire thing. Okay, and then you can build up some of it in this section. Maybe just up till the leaf. Not too much of a curve, so just around there. And then we can have something along this line. Right here. Okay, very, very bright, isn't it? Let's reduce the opacity to 80%. And we're going to apply a Gaussian blur this time of not 15%, but way more than that. So you can go up to about 30%, or even more if you want. But I think 30% is a good one for now. And if you feel like it's a bit too bright and you can't see your pattern very well in some areas, you can definitely reduce the opacity a little bit more. So I am going to do that on my end. You don't have to if you're happy with yours. Perhaps I will reduce it considerably down to about 40% because I want to be able to see my pattern a bit more and not make this so reflective that I can't really see the glitter bits there. Okay, so that's great, looking lovely. Now we're going to just add in a little bit of a reflective highlight at the edges. So to do that, we are going to go back to our red ones first. Let's start off from there. So create a new clipping mask, and then we're going to change the blend mode of this layer to add, and select your red color for the red ones. I'm going to reduce our brush size down to about 8%. And by this edge highlight, what I mean is literally an edge highlight. Okay, you want to be very close to the edge, so you've just got a sliver of this highlight there, and nothing too more than that, right? So just something like that. So go ahead and do this for the other end as well. Just slightly, as you can see. You can even reduce your brush size a bit more. I think I might go down to 6%. Okay. Right. And then for this one, you can go ahead and add it around here on the shadow side a little bit. Alright, so that's that. Now we're going to go ahead and reduce the opacity of this because it's a bit too bright. So reduce it down to about 75% and then apply a Gaussian blur of just about 7%. Because we still want to be able to see this edge highlight without without it getting too diffuse. So 7% is a good number there. I think it's looking nice. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing for our white ones as well. So create a new clipping mask above your add layer on the white group and change the blend mode to add. And we can't use the white color or anything close to what we've got already on those bubbles. But for this effect to show on these bubbles, we're going to use this background green color. Strange, isn't it? This blend mode is a weird one, but this is how it reacts. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use this color, and then we're going to go ahead and apply this nice reflected light. So you can see I'm also including this shape under the metal cap here as well, because I feel like it gives it a bit more of a dimension, feels good to add it there. It's giving it a bit of a glow, basically. Okay, and then go ahead and apply a Gaussian blur to this again, 7%, and it's looking lovely. Okay, so that's great. We are done with the white ones. Basically what we want to do is just add in a little bit more of a specular kind of a reflection on the red ones. We don't need to show that effect on the white ones because it's already very bright and it's okay. I don't think we need to add so much brightness to the others. But let's go ahead and group our white bubble layers together while we're at it. And then we're going to rename this group as white bubbles. Okay. Now for the red one, create a new clipping mask on top, change the blend mode to add, and then we are going to go back to our white ivory color, and we're going to add in these little specular reflections that I was talking about. So to do that, literally this is it. Okay, so we're going to place one there, and perhaps we can have one here. And I'm adding these in the areas where we already have our light reflections, as you can see. Okay, so once you've got this, let's go ahead and blur these and see how much do we really need. So perhaps another 15%? Should we go with 15? Or maybe I'd say about an 11 or a 12%, depending on how it's looking at your end. I like the idea of having a bit more of a concrete ellipse there on this one, so it's looking nice. So I'd say about a 12% at my end, but wherever you can get this kind of an effect that you still have this little ellipse glowing there, you can stop at that. So 12% at my end, and that's looking beautiful. Alright, so let's go ahead and group our red bubbles layers together because we are done with that section. We're going to rename this as red bubbles. It's looking great. So let's get started with the metal caps now for our bubbles. We'll need our sketch layer to be back on now so you can see the vertical edges as well as the horizontal ones. And now let's select this. So we've got our bases here for the metal caps. I'm going to create a new clipping mask to these. and change the blend mode to multiply. And we still have our soft airbrush selected. Let's select the brown color, and we're going to try and emulate the effect of metal here. Okay, so a glossy metal effect where we've got a lot of reflections in a way. Okay, so to do that, all we need to do is try and maintain this line here so that you've got vertical placements of these lines, just a few of them, don't need to go too much into adding these. So go ahead and paint something like this on all of these vertical edges. Just make sure that they are straight, and you can play around with their placement however you want. You don't have to follow the exact ones that I am painting on. Okay, so once you've got something like this in place, we're going to go ahead and apply a slight Gaussian blur to this. So, whoops, just about 3%. So we don't want to blur it out too much, just about 3%, or just touching 4 maybe, just something like that. Okay, and once that's done, reduce the size of your brush to around 4%, and just around the horizontal elliptical edge we're going to add in some shadows. So you might have to just do something like this. Okay, so what we're trying to do here is have an edge like this, like a crescent shaped there, and then the inner aspect here. Okay, we're going to try and blur that. So you've got your soft airbrush as your smudge tool. Go ahead and just blend in the inner aspect. So the outer aspect is nice and crisp, but the inner aspect is blended in slightly. Okay? And we're not using this Gaussian blur for this effect because that's going to blur everything uniformly. It's not something we want. We want crisp outer edges. So that's that. Let's do the same for all of the others now. Okay, so if you turn off your sketch layer, you'll be able to see you've got nice crisp edges here at all of these base edges, and you've got nice blended inner shadows, inner areas. Well, you know what I mean. So for some reason I'm just really struggling with my words today. Okay, next we're going to paint in some highlights to all of our metal cap areas. So create a new clipping mask and then change the blend mode to add. With the same brown color, we're going to still use our soft airbrush. And now let's go ahead and add in some lights out here so you can see what beautiful color we've got suddenly. Now don't be afraid to add in some lights even to these shadow areas. Well, they're not exactly shadows, they're like just darker reflection areas. And you can do this, even have some individual glow areas, and they don't have to be all just around the darker ones. So you can see this is standing alone, just like that. But I would go against adding too many of these though, because then it's just going to look like a little bit of a mess. So just about 3 to 4, and that's it. So if you've seen my crystal ball tutorial, I'm going to link it up here in the, you can see on the screen, it's going to come up there. But I've shown a really nice technique of using similar kind of texture in there and adding a bit more texture to the gold brassy kind of an effect. And it gives it a nice antique kind of a look, because this is not really texturized as such, but in that tutorial I really explain how to go and add in a bit more textured effect there. So check it out if you want. And yeah, it's a good one. I really enjoyed creating that one. It was a nice, beautiful set of colors as well. Sea green and brassy gold. Beautiful. Alright, so once you've got these in place, once again we are going to apply a Gaussian blur to this too. Again, it'll be the same, 3 to almost 4%. Lovely. And you know the drill, we're going to add in our highlights on the opposite ends of these crescent shaped horizontal edge darker gradients. And you can blend in these highlights too. So just make sure that you are blending in the inner aspect and not the entire outer side too. You can spread out the highlight a bit more, to be honest, because it's going to give it a nice glowing kind of an effect anyway. Okay, so that's looking good. Next we're just going to create another clipping mask on top and then change the blend mode to add once more. And all we're going to do at this point is create a bit of a line just across the edge where we've got the vertical and the horizontal edges meeting. And this is just to give it a nice blended kind of an effect and not such a sharp edge as you can see here. Okay, so you can even try and get your quick shape, a nice strong curve present. That one doesn't really need it. Neither does this. Here we go. Alright, reduce your opacity of this layer down to 60% and now apply a slight Gaussian blur. So I'd say another 3%. So you can see it's got a beautiful effect now. Got a soft edge highlight as well, and it doesn't interfere with the rest of these nice looking reflective highlights. Okay, so that's looking good. One last thing that we can do for this layer is to just go back to your base layer here for the metal caps, okay? And select your soft airbrush as your smudge tool. All we're going to do is just reduce your brush size to somewhere around 7%. We're going to very gently blend in just this lower edge. Very, very gently, very slightly. Don't go overboard with this because I just don't want a very stark outline here. It looks quite pixelated and really not that nice. So we're giving it a gentler blurred kind of an effect, okay? Yeah, that's better. So go ahead and do that for all of these. Alright, so that's great. We've blurred all of the edges. Wonderful. Now we're just going to group our metal cap layers together. Rename these as metal caps. Okay, and we'll finish off the metal caps with these loops. So create a new clipping mask to your cap loop layers. Here you can see that. So create a new clipping mask to that and then change the blend mode to multiply. We'll add some shadows just the same way we added them for these gold baubles out here. So to do that, let's go ahead and paint in our shadows for this one. For this color, again, we'll be using our brown color for this. With the soft airbrush, again, keeping in mind where our light source is. So everything on the right side, sorry, on the left side, our highlights will be on the top one. The highlights will be on the top right section and then everything on the left side otherwise. So for our shadows, you can imagine that the shadow is going to be here and then on the inside one, right in this section, okay? Now, while you're at it, go ahead and blend this too. And then repeat this step for all of these metal caps. And then the one on this right side, which is hanging, remember that the inner one has to be on the left side and the actual shadow would be on the right side, because our light source is towards the left for it. And if you happen to see your string layer here, right over on top of this loop, go ahead and erase that as well. Because they're the same color, so it's a bit difficult to see it. There you go, that's better. Okay, great. So we've added shadows on all of these as far as I can see. Yeah, great. And next thing, we're going to create another clipping mask for our loops. Change the blend mode to add, and we're going to add in our highlights on the opposite ends of wherever we've drawn our shadows. So continue like this here. That's looking great. Okay guys, so this is looking good. The only other thing again that I would do is go back to the base loop layer, and then with your soft airbrush as your smudge tool, I would just gently blend in the bases of our loops into the metal cap. So it gives it the kind of effect that it's been melded into the metal cap itself rather than just sitting so abruptly there. So go ahead and do this for all of them. And I'm just going to see about this. So there are some of these areas where I've got these green beads here. So let me see if I can erase a few of them, because they're giving them very non-uniform thickness. There you go, that's better. Okay, let's see, I think there were a couple more somewhere. Here we go, this one. So that's the brown. Yeah, okay, so that's looking good. We've got all of our metal caps done, so amazing. Let's group our cap loops layers together and just rename this as cap loops. Brilliant, so these are done. Next thing that we can work on would be the strings. So create a new clipping mask for the strings layer, change the blend mode to multiply, and we're going to use the brown color. And for the texture, let's go to charcoal and select the burnt tree brush. Okay, and then all we're going to do is just paint in some charcoal texture to this. There you go. So you can see it's a different kind of an effect, but it's looking nice. I'm going to reduce the opacity of this layer to about 70%. And then I'm going to create a highlight layer, so create a new clipping mask and then change the blend mode to add. And then with the same brown color and burnt tree brush, maybe rotate your canvas a little bit and then add in your glittery gold kind of a texture here. Okay, so those are your strings. That's done, that's looking good. I'm going to slightly reduce the opacity of this layer as well, just down to about 65% so that it's not too bright, just enough. Okay, lovely. So this is done too. Let's group our string layers together. So rename this as strings. Okay, and next we're going to be working on our green beads here. So to do that, create a new clipping mask on this, change the blend mode to multiply, and we're going back to our soft airbrush. Select this green color as the green bead itself, or you can select the green color in the second row, which is the same color. And once again, we are going to be applying shadows literally the same way that we've done for all of our baubles so far. So it's going to follow the same kind of lighting pattern. And I'm just going to go ahead and apply these in the same crescent shadow manner. So go ahead and paint those in. Okay, and once those have been painted in, we're going to apply a Gaussian blur to this. So go to adjustments and let's say we can have about 5% or a little bit more, about a 7% Gaussian blur maybe. Yeah, a 7% Gaussian blur looks nice at this end. Okay, we're going to create highlights now. So create a new clipping mask, change the blend mode to add, and then with the same green color, we're going to be painting in our highlights. So highlights for this is quite easy. We're just going for something like a sphere almost, like a round dot. We don't really need to add in too many teardrop patterns or anything like that, nothing complicated. Just something of this sort. And once those are in place, once again we are going to apply some Gaussian blur. So go ahead and do that. So I'd say another 7% Gaussian blur. That's looking good. Okay, so similarly, as we've done an edge highlight for our red and all of these baubles basically, we're going to do the same thing for our green ones as well. So let's go ahead and create a new clipping mask on top. Change the blend mode to add, and we're going to add these reflected highlights to these. So reduce your brush size down to about 5% and add in these reflected highlights in the shadow areas. This is definitely going to help distinguish this green bead from the background. Okay, And then once again, we're going to apply a Gaussian blur to this. So before we do that, actually, let's reduce the opacity of this layer first and see how much do we really need to blur up. So reduce the opacity down to about 50% and then apply a Gaussian blur. Let's say, in this case, I'm pretty happy with just about a 3%. Yeah, 3% Gaussian blur. Now it's looking beautiful. We've got some nice matte effect beads there as well. Lovely. Okay, so it's time now to work on these twigs and the peach berries. So let's get started with this. We are going to, first of all, just group our green beads layers together. Rename that as green beads. Okay. Next, we're going to create a clipping mask to this leaves and brown twigs layer. Then we're going to change the blend mode to multiply. And then with the soft airbrush selected and the brown color, let's go ahead and paint in our shadows. We'll need our sketch layer for this, so just turn it on and reduce the opacity down to about 20% or so. And then we're also going to reduce our brush size to about 3% and then start painting in our shadows. So for this, we will need to have our shadows on the lower edges and then perhaps a little triangular kind of like a shadow that extends right into the area where we've got the berries, something like that. And then when we have this leaves section, what we want to do is again have this shadow on the lower edge of the main stem of this leaf. So we're almost like trying to achieve an effect of a metallic leaf here. It's not like a natural one, but more of like a metallic one. So also for these central veins, go ahead and paint in a simple line in the center for all of them. Okay, and then we're also going to paint in an edge shadow for these. So you can imagine that this would be probably an effect of like they're not completely flat, they have a bit more volume and thickness. So that's the kind of effect that we're trying to get here for all of these leaves. Okay, so that's that. Let's move on to the rest of the twigs. Alright, so we've got all of our shadows here now. And what we're going to do is turn off our sketch layer because we don't want it to interfere with how dark our shadows really look like. So go to Gaussian blur now and then apply a slight Gaussian blur. I'd say about 2%. 2% or maybe, yeah, going up to like 3 to 4%, so that this line is a little blurred. The central veins, they're a little blurred, but just enough to be present, maybe. Something like that. So, or actually, I think I would reduce it a bit because the entire thing is getting blurred then. So have a look and see when your shadows of the twigs are not too blurred out. We want it at that end. So for me, it's when I'm just crossing into 3% and I would stop there. So have a look at yours and see where you can stop. Okay, once that step's done, next we'll be adding in some highlights to the opposite sides of all of these. So turn on your new clipping mask, change the blend mode to add, and we're going to go ahead and paint in our edge highlights. So by that I mean we're just going to be painting in our highlights at the opposite sides of wherever we have placed our shadows. Now for this particular twig, make sure that you leave the space here where you've got the leaves coming off. And then what we can do is add in our highlights. So definitely around the other edge, we're going to add in the highlights at those areas for sure. But we're also going to add in a very thin line of highlight just at the edge where we've got our shadows here. And the reason that we're trying to draw that there is mainly because we're trying to show off that there's a bit of a thickness at the edge there. So this is going to help us to do that. And then also you can add in a slight highlight along the central vein too. Just be gentle while applying it because you do not want it to be too dark. So you've got something of this sort in place. Then continue with the others. Okay, so now you can go ahead and apply a Gaussian blur to the highlights layer. And once again, have a look and see where you can stop with that. And I'd say, for me, it would be somewhere around 3%. Alright, so that's looking good. You can blend in some edges if you feel like they're a bit too off. And I think that should be more than enough. Yeah. Alright, so once this is done, we'll be adding in some shadows to the bases of our entire twigs and leaves as such. So create a new clipping mask on top, change the blend mode to multiply, and then with the same brown color, we're going to be using the soft airbrush for this too. Increase your brush size to about 10% or so, and then just go ahead and apply a general bit of a shadow, especially at the bases of all of these leaves. And then at the twigs here. Alright, let's blend. Let's blur this out now. So once again, we just need a slight blur, so I'd say about a 3%. And that's looking good. Okay, and then for the last step, we're going to create another clipping mask. Change the blend mode to add, and then paint with the gold color this time. We're going to be painting in some gold highlights at the tips of these leaves. Still got the soft airbrush selected. Play around with your brush size to see what's appropriate for you. I've got a brush size of 10%. You've got this beautiful color, as you can see though. You can even add some on the twigs. You can probably tell that these are not very natural kind of twigs as well. Everything's a nice festive gold in a way. Alright, and now you're just going to go ahead and blur this up too. So I'd say about a 5% or a 7% Gaussian blur, and that looks beautiful. Alright, so we are done with our leaves and twigs layers. So group them all together and then rename this group as leaves and twigs. Lovely. Let's get started with the berries. So create a new clipping mask. We're going to start off with a texture first. So it's a very slight texture again, just like the baubles. We changed the blend mode to multiply, and we are going down to charcoals here, and then we're going to select the vine charcoal brush. It's quite a dense charcoal brush, so It's going to give us a nice uniform kind of an effect and barely visible as well. So we're going to select this white ivory color and then gently go ahead and paint in this texture. It's quite dark right now, but we are going to reduce the opacity of the layer quite significantly. It's going to be barely visible, but it will help because it's there, and it will help with the shadows and highlights to be there. Make it, because it's a blend mode, isn't it? So all of the layers are going to work together and bring a different effect than if this texture wasn't there. Okay, so that's looking good. Let's reduce the opacity of this layer down to 40%. So you can see it's barely there, but if we remove it, it'll be a very slight effect, and that's looking good. Okay, create a new clipping mask, and we are going to add in some shadows. So we'll start off with the blend mode, multiply, and go back to your soft airbrush, and with the same white color we'll be painting in shadows on the opposite edges. We really are not going to go ahead with highlights for this because they're going to be really glossy otherwise and take the attention away from the bubbles themselves, which is something we want to avoid. So again, we're following the crescent shape as we have for all of the spherical objects in this tutorial. So go ahead and paint those in. Okay, so once you've painted them in, we're going to apply a Gaussian blur to blend them up. So let's say about a 4% Gaussian blur, that would look nice. And then once more, we're going to create another clipping mask on top. Change the blend mode to multiply again, and reduce your brush size down to about 4% with the same white color. We're going to paint in another layer of edge shadows. So it's going to be a thinner layer of shadows this time. And then apply another Gaussian blur to this. So this time just about a 2 or 3%. And that looks great. Okay, so that's looking lovely. We are done with the white berries as well. Like I said, I don't want to apply a gloss to these because it's going to really take the attention away from the bubbles. So yeah, let's group our berry layers together and rename this as berries. It looks great. Okay, so we're nearly done with everything. The only thing that's left is to add in shadows of all the overlapping objects on each other. So you can see we've got so many objects that are overlapping, isn't it? We've got some berries here as well. We've got some leaves that are overlapping on this white bubble here. We've got this gold bubble overlapping on this one here. So there's lots of objects that need to be having some shadows technically to make this look a little bit more realistic. So let's get started by adding all of these there. Firstly, we'll start off with the gold ones. So go back to your gold bubbles layer. And one more thing that I've noticed, I would really like it if I could have this nice orangey kind of an effect on the other side slightly too. So this was the linear burn layer that we've got. Okay, so go to your linear burn layer and we can have our gold color selected. For this, increase your brush size slightly to about 11% and just paint in a slight orangish kind of an edge out here, and just blur this up with the rest of it. So you can see it's looking nicer now. It's looking like it's got a nice edge and not that flat. So taper it down and blend it. All right, so we can do the same for all of these. Alright, so once that's in place, I think it's looking much better now, a lot more spherical in a way. Great. Now we're going to create a new clipping mask above on top of all of our layers for the gold baubles, and then change the blend mode to multiply. And with the brown color, let's go ahead and add in shadows wherever we need them. So you've already added shadows here for the strings. Perhaps we can add in a bit more just at the base there. For the loop, just something like that, and then see in all of our bubbles, do we have any objects that are overlapping and need some shadows. So maybe just some for the leaves here, and then definitely in this particular bubble we need to enhance this a bit more. So make sure that the shadow that you're having down here, they're both curving inside like I explained before. And then you can have these blending in a bit more. Okay, blend it in with your smudge tool. And then have a look. I think I would have a bit of a shadow of this white bubble on this edge. Similarly on this one too. And perhaps just a dot there for this twig. That's looking good. Alright, so we're going to reduce the opacity of this layer down to 60% because we don't want it to be too dark. Okay, so that's the gold baubles layers shadows done. Lovely. We're going to move on to the red ones now. So create a new clipping mask above all layers in your red baubles group. Change the blend mode to multiply, and with the same brown color, let's go ahead and paint in all of the overlapping shadows. So definitely this green bead here would be casting a shadow here. You can see how much of an effect just adding a shadow has on this. So reduce your brush size for objects like twigs here. Start at a distance, because remember that this is a curved object. Okay, so you would probably have a curved shadow like this too. Okay, beautiful. And then have a look what else, what other objects are here. So we've got this. So one thing that we can do for these shiny balls is that maybe we can have the yellow color selected first, and then paint in a light reflected kind of an effect there first. Blend that in slightly, and then go ahead and add in your shadow just a bit. It doesn't cause much of a difference really, but I think it just might enhance it very slightly. So yeah, just make sure you're blending it very lightly. Don't take away too much of the color when you're blending it. So once again, we are having a bit of a curve here with the twig. Something here for the leaves. Blend, blend, blend. And then also for this bubble. Then this green bead. So the best way to make all of these shadows is to go one by one and have a look all around it, what needs a shadow. Before we move further, one more thing that we can do is enhance the shadow under these metal caps, because that's going to give it a bit more of a natural look too. There you go. Okay, where else? Just a little bit here. And at the top. When you come to these leaves, you can probably make them at a bit of a distance as well. So that's looking so much nicer. And then remember, this bubble in itself is also going to cast a shadow. And the bead here, don't forget the bead. Okay. Alright, so that's looking good at that end. Let me see, we can add a little bit of a shadow here for the top, and then of course one for this metal ball, the glitter ball. Maybe we can perhaps just first of all add our yellow layer. Blend that, and then go ahead and add some with the brown. Yeah. Okay, so that's looking beautiful. We're going to move on to the white ones now. So let's go ahead and do that. Create a new clipping mask on top of all of our layers in the white baubles group, and change the blend mode to multiply. And let's resume. So we're going to add a little shadow over there, add one here, distance. Actually, we can have it like that perhaps. And then it can be something like this. Or maybe Perhaps this is a closer edge, so that's fine. But something like that. Okay. And then curve it again. So something of that sort. Okay, let's go ahead and blend this. Or let's wait. I think we can wait a second and add in all of our shadows first for the white ones before we go ahead and blend anything. Okay, increase my brush size, add in this spot here. And then remember to add in your shadow under the metal cap as well. Okay, so I think that seems to be it. It's not real we don't really have many objects on these white ones that are casting shadows. So yeah, let's reduce the opacity of this because this is really dark. But we're going to reduce it down to about 50%. And I might just go ahead and apply some Gaussian blur instead of manually blending everything. So I guess about a 3% Gaussian blur would do. Yeah, 3% Gaussian blur, and we've got beautiful shadows here on our ornaments. Amazing. So we're done with all of our shadows here as well, as you can see. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to just add in the effect of some depth here in our illustration, and the quickest way to do that is to apply some blurring effect on all of our snowflakes. So just select your select your snowflakes layer, and then we are going to apply a Gaussian blur to this. So select Gaussian blur and apply a blur of just about 2%. Okay, we don't really need to apply much more than that. We're nearly finished, guys. We're just going to add in a bit more of a gradient to our background to give it an even more depth, kind of an impact. So to do that, let's go ahead and create, we're going to create a new layer below our snowflakes layer. And then we're going to change the blend mode of this one to multiply. And let's select the same color as the background. For our brush, we can select the soft brush because it's got a bigger size than the soft air brush. So we're going to use that. And I've got a brush size of around 29%. We can have a darker edge in the left lower corner. So go ahead and apply a darker edge like a crescent, and as you can see, it's got a nice dark kind of an effect, and it's giving a really nice look over here. So just about, you can see I've gone just about till here where my bubbles are in this section. So do that and then apply a Gaussian blur to this as well. And you can seriously go ahead and apply it, spread it out as much as you want. I would go up to about maybe about a 60% in this, but have a look how much darker you want it, you can go ahead and apply that. And then we're going to create a new clipping mask on top, a new layer on top of this multiply layer. And then we're going to change the blend mode of this one to add. And then we are going to use the same color, but this time our add section is just going to be up on this right upper section. Okay, that's looking beautiful. Okay, let's apply some Gaussian blur to this. And that would be just about how much ever you want, really. I would go just about 20% or something on this, but have a look, play around and see what works for you. I'm going to reduce the opacity of our multiply layer slightly, about 75%, because it's a bit too dark in my opinion. But I think that looks smashing. Alright guys, so we have just completed this beautiful Christmas ornaments illustration. Thank you so much for joining me in this tutorial. I hope you had fun creating these beautiful ornaments. And yeah, thank you so much. I'll see you in the next one. So guys, if you'd like to share your creation with me online, remember to tag me in your post on Instagram. I absolutely love seeing your versions of the tutorials and sharing them on my page. And make sure to subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed this tutorial too. And don't forget to check out my other videos. I've got so many more magical projects waiting for you. New tutorials come out every 2 weeks on my channel, so hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.